1953 is another wild year in ufology. There is so much going on in this year that it'll take more than one episode to do it justice. In this video, we will be covering the Robertson Panel report and the Kingman, Arizona crash retrieval that is in the news again. Are UFOs and UAP real?
The truth is that we've never proved one, but there are things flying around up there that we haven't fully identified yet.
UFO and UAP have been here for a long time.
There's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are.
UFO and UAP are a global phenomenon.
I won't talk to you about what I know about it, but it's very interesting. But Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
These close encounters are categorized into 5 different categories. It's January of 1953, and the Robertson Panel, a scientific committee, is meeting at the behest of the Intelligence Advisory Committee, the IAC, based on a CIA review of the United States Air Force's Project Bluebook UFO investigation. The panel was briefed on U.S. military activities and intelligence, hence the report was originally classified secret. Later declassified, the Robertson Panel's report concluded that UFOs were not a direct threat to national security, but could pose an indirect threat by overwhelming standard military communications due to public interest in the subject. Most UFO reports, they concluded, could be explained as misidentification of mundane aerial objects, and the remaining minority could in all likelihood be simply explained with further study. The Robertson Panel recommended that a public education campaign should be undertaken in order to reduce public interest in the subject, minimizing the risk of swamping air defense systems with reports at critical times, and that civilian UFO groups should be monitored. The Robertson Panel's report was contained within a larger internal CIA report by F.C. Durant, a CIA officer who served as secretary to the panel, which summarizes the activities of the panel and its conclusions. This wider document is commonly referred to as the Durant Report. In layman's terms, their conclusions are that the UFOs are just misidentified natural phenomena and pose no threat to national security. The only threat is from people clogging the phone lines with reports of things that aren't real. That they know who manages the program, and also that a highly classified United States Air Force memo from the 1950s is still in effect today regarding UFO secrecy. It's May 24th of 1953, and we're in the American Southwest again, in the town of Kingman, Arizona, and we have a famous close encounter of the fourth kind. Witnesses reported seeing what looked like a fleet of 8 UFO craft having a dogfight as they passed over Kingman. 3 of the UFO crash and are recovered by the Air Force. 4 living aliens are taken to Area 51 and used to help U.S. military personnel reverse engineer their advanced alien technology. 1953 is a busy year in ufology. Something different was going on that may have caused the particular attention of our off-world visitors. The U.S. was conducting Operation Upshot Knothole, a series of historic nuclear tests. The Atomic Energy Commission, based out of Los Alamos Labs in New Mexico, were directing a series of 11 atmospheric nuclear tests at the Nevada test site between March 17th and June 4th. 9 of the tests were conducted on Yucca Flat. There were 7 tower shots and 2 airdrops. 2 shots were conducted on Frenchman's Flats. One of them was a first-of-its-kind nuclear cannon.
Well, another ZI atomic test is history now. Past history for the record books and live history for future planning. It was a double-header test like Buster Jangle and Tumbler Snapper, covering both weapon development and civil and military effects. And in some ways, it was our biggest research job so far. The preparation job was big too. Many hundreds of tons of material and months of intense planning and labor by skilled personnel were the ingredients, poured into a gigantic test tube, our Nevada proving grounds. In the spring of 1953, the mixture boiled up in a series of 11 atomic detonations. Operation Upshot Knothole. The residue or end product of the reaction was knowledge, some of it in a yes or no form, immediately useful. and some of it requiring detailed analysis. The funnel into our Nevada test tube was the same old road up from Las Vegas. Nearly 80 miles of standard desert road which carries very little traffic when the proving grounds are quiet. Indian Springs was still primarily an Air Force support station for atomic test operations. The Desert Rock Troop encampment was in the same old place off to the left, after we turned off Highway 95. Inside the check gate and Mercury were living and technical areas and the field headquarters of the main test organization, a joint AEC and Department of Defense activity. From Mercury, the road goes roughly northward. It cuts through one range of hills. On across the valley of Frenchman Flat, then heads up into a notch in a second range. In this notch is the CP, the control point, the real nerve center and communications hub of the test site. This was the test manager's forward headquarters for the series, and primarily the center of operations for the weapons development program, Upshot. Looking out from the control point, an observer can see both of the major blast areas. Frenchman Flat, a dry lake bed, is still visible back in the valley we just crossed, though the actual ground zero point can't be seen. Yucca Flat lies on northward, in the next valley beyond the control point. 9 of Upshot knothole's 11 shots were fired out here on Yucca between March 17th and June 4th. Shot 10, 25 May, proof tested another delivery system, the Army's 280 millimeter gun. When this shot was added to the program, some additional effects tests were scheduled to observe results of the low burst height, approximately 520 feet above ground. Since no gun-type assembly had been detonated since the Hiroshima bomb, the weapons development scientists had on this shot their first opportunity to study the nucleonic behavior and fireball configuration of such a device. Yield 15 kilotons. Unlike the situation with an implosion weapon, the scientists were here able to observe fireball growth from a body of fissionable material whose exact shape and dimensions at the moment of detonation were known.
So, once over lightly at least, that winds up the story of Operation Upshot Knothole's weapon development program.
In his book, 7 Days in May, historian Harry Drew explains what became of the 3 craft that came out of the sky that day. One, he says, was obliterated when it smashed into the mountainside that towers above Kingman, setting off a fire. Another, resembling an artist drawing, was found intact in a desert area miles outside Kingman. And a third came down hard, clipped a rocky butte, then crashed adjacent to a small reservoir. Military security camped out around the site until the recovery team arrived and took the unknown craft back to a base in Nevada.
Spent 10 years in the Marine Corps, 4 years working with the Air Force as a civilian, doing experimental testing on aircraft. Since my Marine Corps days, I was a pilot in the service and a fighter pilot, and fought in World War II after the latter part of World War II and the Korean War conflict. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I took a job with the Air Force at Wright-Patterson, doing experimental flight testing on various different modifications and tech orders that they had incorporated into aircraft, various different aircraft, F-89, back then the B-47, F-102, and those aircraft. While I was at Wright-Patterson, of course, I was approached by an individual that, and I'm not going to mention his name, to determine if I wanted to work in an area on just new creative things, okay? And apparently that was the flying disc simulator. What they had done, they had selected several of us, and they reassigned me to Link Aviation, which was a simulator manufacturer. At that time, they were building what they call the C-11B, and F-102 simulator, B-47 simulator, and so forth. And they wanted us to get the experience before we actually started work on the flying disc simulator, which I spent 30-some years working on. The simulator wasn't actually functional until around 1958, where the simulator was actually operable. The craft that they used to build, which is a 30-meter one, was the one that crashed in Arizona, Kingman, Arizona, back in 53 or 52. I think it was 53. That's the one they used. That's the first one that they took out to the test site. It landed about 15 miles from, which used to be an Army air base, which is now a defunct Army base. I can't recall the name of it. But that particular craft, there were some problems with, number one, getting it on the flatbed to take it up to Area 51. They couldn't get it across the dam because of the road. It had to be barged across the Colorado River at the time, and then taken up to where people go now, up 93, out to Area 51, which was just being really constructed at the time, and taken down those dirt roads and out to that particular area of the test site. There were 4 aliens aboard that thing, and those aliens went to Los Alamos, and they put certain people in there with them, people that were astrophysicists, just general scientists, to ask them questions. The way the story was told to me was there was only one of them that would talk to any of these scientists that they put in the lab with them. Only one of the aliens. The rest wouldn't talk to anybody or, even have a conversation with them. First they thought, it was all, ESP or, what do I want to say?
Telepathy?
Yeah, mental telepathy, but, most of that is kind of a joke to me because they actually speak, maybe not like we do, but they actually speak and can converse, The difference between this aircraft or this disc and other discs that they had looked at was that it was much simpler design. In the simulator, it was one big thing different. The thing that, like Lazar calls the reactor, okay, we didn't have a reactor. We had a space in a thing that looked like the reactor, but that wasn't the thing we operated the simulator with. We operated with 6 large capacitors that were charged with 1 million volts each. Say there were 6 million volts in those capacitors. They're largest capacitors ever built. These particular capacitors, they last for 30 minutes, so you could get in there and actually work the controls and do what you had to get the aircraft or get the simulator, the disc to operate, okay? Actually, when it was operable, it would lift off the ball about a certain amount there was a dimension there that we had that it actually lifted up, and it could actually turn, a certain amount of degrees left to right or whatever. In a simulator now, you'll notice that there are no seat belts, right? And the same thing with the actual craft, no seat belts. You don't need seat belts because when you fly one of these things upside down, there's no upside down like in a regular aircraft. You just don't feel it. You have your own gravitational field right inside. So if you're flying upside down, to you, you're right side up. There weren't any windows. The only place we had any visibility at all, and it was done with cameras or video type things at that time, was in the turret section. takes a lot of time because of the area and the smallness of it. Just to raise your hand, it becomes complicated. You have to be trained with your mind, you know, to accept what you're going to actually feel. And
So there's some
experience.
perceptual distortion.
There's a lot of distortion, yeah.
Yeah.
Seeing, just moving about, after a while, after you get used to it and all, and you do it, it's simple. You got to know where everything is, you know, and you got to understand what's going to happen to your body. It's no different than, you know, accepting the G-forces, you know, when you're flying a aircraft or coming out of a dive, you know, and that kind of thing. It's a whole new ballgame.
Did our flight crews ever take one of these discs out into space?
You know, I don't know that. I don't really know that. I'm sure they have. I'm saying it probably took a while to train enough of the people or sufficient time. The whole big problem with the disc is that it's so exacting in its design and so forth, and it can't be used, it can't be used as a like we use aircraft today with dropping bombs and you know, having machine guns, you know, in the wings and that kind of stuff. The design is so exacting that you can't add anything. You can't. It's got to be just right. There's a big problem in the design of where things are put. Say, you know, where the center of the aircraft is and that type of thing. Even the fact that we raised it 3 feet so the taller guys could get in and stuff. The actual ship was extended back to its original configuration, but actually raised. We had a long period of introduction into meeting, you know, say an EVE, an alien. And I called him J-Rod, of course that's what they called him, but that wasn't his, you know, I don't know if that was his real name or not, but that's the name that the linguist gave him, you know. So he knew J-Rod, you know. And I did draw a sketch of him when he was, before I left him in a meeting, but, and I provided it to some people, but that was my impression of what I saw. He'd sound just like, if you spoke, he'd sound like you. You know, he's like one of the, you know, a parrot, you know, but he'd try and answer your question, you know. A lot of times you'd have a hard time understanding, you know, because if you didn't put it on paper and explain yourself, half the time he couldn't give you a good answer. Well, the preparation was, you know, basically going through. First of all, I went to all of the different nationalities in the world, right? Just, you know, these, whatever, you know.
Human nationalities.
Yeah, human nationalities, you know. Then they got into going into other forms of life, you know, even down to, you know, animals and that type of thing. And the fact that, you know, this J-Rod had, his skin was pinkish, but a little bit rough, you know, and that kind of stuff. Not, you know, not horrible looking, you know, or to me, he didn't look horrible looking. Some of the guys, you know, that was in the particular groups that I was in, they never even made it, you know, as far as I was concerned. You know, when they gave you the psychological question, you know, I just answered them the way I felt, and I had no problem, you know. And that's what they wanted to know. You know, if you'd become, like, you know, hey, here's an alien, he's from here, and I don't know what, you know, one of those kind of things, you know. But it never bothered me, you know, it didn't amount to much.
So what kind of scientific advice he would give the crew that was building or back engineering these?
Basically, it was only engineering advice or science advice. You know, say for example, I performed the calculation, and there's I spoke of a book that, it's not a book, it's big assembly of various different divisions of on gravitational technology, okay? And the key element in there, all the information wasn't there because even our guys, our people that were the top mathematicians and stuff couldn't figure some of this stuff out. So we would take it and then, you know, we'd have to, with each design, you know, there's a requirement for calculations. And we'd have to prove by calculations, you know, that this thing's gonna operate. No different than anything else we do. And sometimes you get into a spot where you try and try and try, and even if you use the formulas to come up with this thing that they'd provide you, it wouldn't work. And that's where he'd come in, you know, to tell him to look at this and see what we did wrong. The last 40 years or so, or 60 years, maybe there's, I'd say 40 years anyway, not counting the simulators, I'm talking about actual craft, there's probably maybe 2 or 3 dozen various different sizes.
That we've built, or that we have
that we built.
Okay.
I don't know much about the ones that, you know, that they brought here. I know about that one out of Kingman, but that's about it. And I know the company that hauled it out of there and who's out here now. A couple of different versions that they used. One was a chemical version, one was a solid version. And I don't even know the chemistry of the chemical version. But there's one that operates with under chemicals, with certain chemicals. Actually, what they've done with, I think, with these triangles that people have seen is they've got like 2 or 3 of, say, a 30-meter crafts that are in the center of it. In the outside perimeter, you know, you could put anything you want as long as these particular ones meet the design criteria. They'll operate. Then it's more or less all that other stuff on the outside is tag along. But I'm sure if they put a large weapon up there and fired it, it would probably, you know, not work. Or they'd kill themselves. There are certain reasons for the secrecy. I could understand that, no different than, you know, the first atomic bomb that they built. But, you know, they're getting so far ahead now with aircraft design, and people have come up and they're visualizing and seeing some of the design aspects that are put in some of the aircraft today. And eventually, I'm saying, like I told you gentlemen earlier, that 2003, most of this stuff will be out in everybody's plate to look at. Maybe not the way that everybody expects it, but in some manner they determine appropriate, you know, to show everybody, hey, look at what we got.
So
you think
this is the year 2000 that we're doing this interview, so you think within 3 years that the public will be told something?
I said this years ago, 2003, and the reason why I said that, the document I signed ends in 2003.
And you're not the only one that signed.
And I'm not the only one. See, this I call it FOGIT, or that's what they call it, fundamentals of gravitational, you know, techniques basically. But it's evolved. Now I'm sure that manual now is just expanded. We're no different than anything else that they build for design criteria, because anything we do today, we have to have a design criteria manual, you know, and they put all the information in that. And if you ever get...
On April 22nd of 2024, less than a month before the date of this video, Christopher Mellon released a government-approved transcript of a text exchange he had with a senior U.S. government official regarding the alleged historic crash retrieval program and the Kingman case. In the exchange, the government official shares that they are making huge progress getting into the crash retrieval program, and that, redacted, would be slack-jawed if they found out what we now know. This case just will not die and continues to produce witnesses and evidence. What do you guys think about this one? Is it real?